Well, good evening. Good evening to all of you, and a very special welcome. Ambassadors, High Commissioners, distinguished guests, such a pleasure to host you here at Oxford University for the Kyoto Prize of this year. I speak on behalf not just of myself, my colleagues at the Blavatnik School of Government, my colleagues from Oxford who are here, but also our colleagues from the Inamori Foundation. And we're very honored here this evening to have the chair, Shinobu Inamori Kanazawa-san, welcome, and Hayato Takenouchi, the Secretary General of the Inamori Foundation, and the wonderful Inamori Foundation team who have come to spend this time with us in Oxford. It's very special for being in this 900-year-old university to be able to celebrate just the excellence of human achievement. And as I said in the video, at the Blavatnik School of Government, our mission to help communities around the world be better governed, to find and teach people to serve their communities better, is one whose ultimate goal is human flourishing. And the Kyoto Prizes celebrate the most extraordinary human flourishing. And it's a delight as part of our celebration each year to have a panel with our laureates, which enables us to ask them things which are not about their research directly, and to give you all here this evening a chance to put your questions to them and to learn from them. So a big welcome, and I hope you'll participate with me in this evening's conversation. We're actually celebrating 3 laureates this evening. And the first, Dr. Yana Gimachi, or Dr. Yana, as he was known to all of his friends, an extraordinary scientist who made world-changing contributions in the field of embryology, with practical implications for the kind of IV fertilization, in vitro fertilization, that people around the world could benefit from. His work won him awards across the world and the 2023 Kyoto Prize in Advanced Technology. Very sadly, Dr. Yana passed away last year, but we wanted to celebrate him this evening, and I'd like to share with you a very special tribute to him.
So the first time I ever worked with Yana was in 1995 when I had a crazy idea for an experiment, and it was the first time I actually met him. And I wrote to him about it from New Jersey, and he said, sure, come over here and do it. And I didn't have much money at the time, so I ended up staying in his apartment for 5 days to do the experiments, and having never met the guy. It's amazing. But what it told me about it was that he was very trusting of the science, right? He and I had corresponded a lot before then. He knew my work, so but he'd never met me, as far as I knew. I mean, I don't remember meeting him before at meetings or anything. I was flabbergasted that he offered his apartment, honestly, to tell you the truth. But he was somebody, what I came to know over the years was that he was somebody who loved to work with other scientists, and he would do anything he could to make it possible. And in that particular case, meaning giving me his second bedroom in his small condo on Ward Avenue. And I grew to learn a lot about his sense of excellence, so I learned a lot about that. He was first my mentor, and then we became very close friends over the years. We were family. I mean, that's all I can say. But we became very close friends, very family. There was no hierarchy at all, except for our respect for his wisdom and his age. We ended up respecting him more as a person than a scientist in the end. Not that he wasn't a great scientist, but we got to know his person, and that's always a little bit more important in the end. So he was a wealth of knowledge that spanned 50 years. What I liked most about him is I could go ahead and ask him any question about fertility or early embryology on just about any species, and he would know part or all of the answer. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, we worked on mouse all the time, but at one point there was one experiment that I needed to look at sea urchin embryos, and I remembered him talking about it. He said, "Oh yeah, I know how to do that." And in the next month, he had my postdoc out at the ocean picking up sea urchins and doing the experiments. I mean, it just was amazing. He also was somebody who did something immediately. So I learned not to ask him to help me with an experiment unless I was already ready to do it, because he was ready the next day, to work on the experiment. If he agreed to do it, he was ready to work on it the next day.
He was relentless. He would have an idea and he would try it several different ways until he got it to work. And he's been very successful over his life because everything that he took on, he made it work. So the man was irreplaceable. And now that he's gone, we feel very sad. Most famous professors are like royalty. They kind of have an attitude. Yana didn't have that. Yana would roll up his sleeve and get in there with you and get dirty. I mean, when we had the flood, Yana the next day came in with gun boots and a big shovel, and he started shoveling mud out of the building.
If I plan to do something, it often takes me months, days, weeks to get it going. Yana, once he made his decision, he did it. He solved the morality of it very quickly, whether it should be done, whether it shouldn't be done. He solved the science of it very quickly. Is this important? Is this something that's been answered already? And he solved the question of whether he could do it or not. And he put all these calculations very quickly, and if all these boxes checked off, he began. It takes me sometimes months, weeks, years to check off all those boxes and decide that this is the right thing to do. But Yana was very quick about it, and he came up with an answer. He did the experiment, he got it published, and he made it work. And so I spent many years at Johns Hopkins University where I saw geniuses, literal geniuses, fail. And I saw people of average intelligence, which is pretty good actually, succeed very well. And the difference between the two is persistence. And this is what Yana had. Yana was bright, but he also had persistence. But his key, I think, in addition to the persistence in his organization, was not so much an intellectual capacity over and above everybody else. It was, in fact, a way he looked at the world. He was able to think outside the box. So my favorite example is when he started injecting sperm into an egg. So in the 60s and 70s, people were suddenly injecting calcium into eggs because the eggs were big cells and they could see what calcium would do to the egg. So it was just something that they could manipulate. So Yana took that and he said, if you can inject a calcium molecule into an egg, maybe you can inject a sperm with a bigger needle. So it was that leap, right, of intellectual, just willing to think outside the box. And he was always milling this in his mind. He was making connections all the time, right? It's not brilliance per se. It's a particular form of intelligence that allows you to think outside the box, to bring people outside your field into your field. Curious, joyful. He really enjoyed life. He enjoyed all aspects of life, and doggedly persistent. I mean, he was focused. I would call him focused on his goal. So focused, joyful, and persistent, yeah.
I mean, to me, he was a little fella. He wasn't a very big man, but he was tenacious. He just kept going. He was like the ever-ready bunny. He just never stops, keeps going, and he was here 7 days a week. 7 days a week he was in the lab. He was a humanist. He helped everybody. He was brilliant, and he was successful.
He had a lot of interests outside biology. He had a small telescope in his apartment that he would look at. He had interests, and he was fearless in getting the work done. Once there was this great story where he needed fish for an experiment that he wanted to do by himself, and so he went to the Japanese gardens to get some guppies, and a guard came out and started, yelling at him, and he just ran away, because he didn't want to get in trouble. And here's, like, world famous National Academy member being nervous about being caught by a security guard, a very human thing, right? So we're all human, right? I think his humanity was something you didn't expect, knowing about his greatness behind it. But he had a wry sense of humor. He enjoyed a good joke. He loved to laugh, at himself, at other people. His humanity, I think, was the thing that was hidden behind his professional greatness. He was absolutely thrilled by the Kyoto Prize. He was swimming in joy for months. And I'm really glad that he got it before he died. It was a great way to go out. When I went to the Kyoto at the request of the Inori Foundation to represent Yana when I was there, at one point there was a princess of Japan who was part of the ceremony, and she, royalty, and I remember we went up, and I had to meet her at the end because she wanted to meet us because we represented Yana. And there was a colleague of mine, one of Yana's trainees, who was there too, and he was shaking because he was going to meet this princess. Yana would have loved that. He would have been, he loved Japan. He loved his history with it. He loved his connection with it. He had connections with his Japan throughout his career. Hawaii made that possible. It's easy for Japanese to come here, both the distance-wise and culturally. It's easy for them to come here. So he had trained Japanese students all his life. He worked with Japanese physicians. To the end of his life, he was working with Japanese physicians to translate some of his discoveries into the clinic. So he loved Japan. He took his wife's ashes there. He wants his ashes to go there. So it meant a great deal to him, the Kyoto Prize, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, that's Dr. Yana, whose research and life work, but also his spirit, stays on well beyond his passing last year. The Kyoto Prize winner in basic science this year is Elliott Lieb, who's sitting to my left. One of the world's foremost mathematical physicists whose contributions have transformed the way we see the atom, the molecule, but also the stars. His work has brought mathematics to physics, to chemistry, to quantum information science. He did his PhD here in this country, in Birmingham, and I discovered today he won a Fulbright and went to Kyoto as a young man in 1956, a special connection there. Elliott, when you heard about Dr. Yana's thirst for collaboration, did that ring a bell with you? Do you share that, or do you prefer to be left alone?
No, the answer to both is yes, of course. There are moments when one thing and another thing, but I've had a lot of really good collaborators, and I have to say that a good share of what I've done is because of collaborators. I didn't do it all by myself, that's for sure. I think that answers your...
And what makes a great collaboration, and what makes a really bad one?
That's another question that has various answers. There's a question of age, which has to be transcended in different ways. But what makes a good collaboration is you have to more or less think the same way, but not exactly the same way. And that's what makes it interesting and useful. You have to not only think the same way, but you have to have similar talents. If one is overpowering the other, it doesn't work. It's a very human relationship, so you have to be good at human relationships, which is not always easy. And the times have to be right. There are many factors. It's hard to pinpoint.
And Dr. Ngaire was also described as relentless and getting things done, and whereas his collaborator wasn't. So which one of the two are you in your collaborations?
Again, it depends. Depends on the year, on the season, how I got up in the morning, all kinds of things. I've had it both ways.
Yeah. And what's the most unlikely collaboration you've had?
I'm sorry?
What's the most unlikely collaboration you've had? Or the one that's taken you most away from your core?
Oh, I haven't tried to quantify that. It's very difficult. Once I had several collaborations with a sort of overpowering character, but I had to sort of deal with. Once I've had a relation with somebody that needed to be led along. So I've had all kinds of possibilities. And I can't say one is good and the other is not good. It's a chemical thing that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Nalini, of course, is the Kyoto Prize Laureate in Arts and Philosophy, an extraordinary artist. Sadly, you will have missed by now her show at the National Gallery, which ended last year in June, an amazing show. And Nalini, you share your own work with the whole world on Instagram. There's this philosophy in your work, which is that it is for the world. Do you ever collaborate?
I have collaborated. Sorry, I have a very bad throat. I'm going to try my best. I have collaborated, and I've loved collaborating. It's different from than in science, of course. I've worked with theatre people across different disciplines, an actor, a director, and I've also collaborated with other artists across borders, and we've made things together. But the good thing about the collaboration is I get to learn something, and the other also gets to learn. Together we make something which is a third thing, which is not me, which is not her, but it's something else that comes out, and that's the adventure. And I've always collaborated with women. I've always liked to work with women.
And your art addresses issues that really affect women. Is that your intent? Is your intent to speak to women through your art, or to challenge everybody to think about?
Well, women, and I'm a woman, have been slaves for a long time, and that slavery still exists. It's not that it hasn't gone away yet, at least in large parts of the world. And I think women will vouch for this, that their pay scales are never the same as their male counterparts. So I think that this is a struggle that we're still working on.
But when you say slavery, you're not talking about you and me. You're talking about women living in other conditions, or you are? Is there a subtle...
No, there is a subtle... I mean, if you really get into yourself, you'll understand how and where you've compromised yourself in some manner because of a certain past, because of this bundle that you carry, the whole history of womankind. And I think somewhere or the other that is still lurking around.
Let me ask each of you, we're a school of government. If you were to speak directly to the heads of governments around the world, what is it you would want to say to them?
Well, it's not an easy question to answer. I believe firmly in democracy, and I think it's the only way out. But the thing is, we haven't reached there yet. It's still a process, and I think that no country there's a movement towards it, but I think that we're still not there in its full form. And I think if we try to understand each other and understand the planet, and look at these things in a more humanistic way, in a more holistic way, and look at the planet as one whole rather than divisive. After all, borders are man-made, not women-made.
And is that what you hope people will be challenged to do when they look at your work?
That's a big thing to say. I mean, I make these animations. If there's something that angers me or makes me excited about something, I make an animation and I add text and music to it too. It's all on my iPad. I carry the studio with me everywhere, and I make the music on GarageBand. So it's just at that moment I feel irritated, deeply irritated, or deeply passionate, and I have to put that across in some manner. And then it's out in the world, and I have about 8,000 people following these things, and hopefully somewhere it hits a target. And I said, well, somebody starts to think.
Wonderful. And Elliott, what would you say to the heads of governments across the world? What would you want to tell governments to do or to stop doing?
Well, it's maybe a little prosaic, but I say encourage or work hard at STEM teaching and research. And we need that. People should be more literate than they are, so the government should encourage this, to literacy in science, mathematics, etc. It's very important, I think, for our lives. And it's very important not to lose talent. The way governments act nowadays in a laconic way, that we lose a lot of talent. And people should be encouraged. It's not easy, but at a rather early age, to be interested in mathematics and science and engineering, technology.
And when you say you lose talent, what, do you lose it to Wall Street and tech startups, or do you lose it to other countries?
Well, sometimes it just disappears. People just cash in and disappear from consideration. If they don't get encouragement at an early age, they just walk away from it and, I don't know, become farmers or whatever they become. But they don't do these, or go into these kinds of fields, and that's a terrible tragedy too.
Can I ask you, Elliott, you grew up in the Bronx.
Yes, I did.
Who encouraged you? Where was the spark that took you to become one of the world's most renowned mathematical physicists?
Oh, you're very kind to say that. Well, I went to the Bronx High School of Science. That was a help. But although it has to be admitted that the strongest fields that they had was English literature and music, as it turned out. But anyway, the New York public education system was pretty good and free. And in those days, you could really get a good education for nothing. And the school, Bronx High School of Science, other schools in New York City, produced a lot of outstanding scientists. It's still working that way, but it was very exceptional that they succeeded as well as they did. I put some money, the public school system put money into education, selective students in these areas specifically, and it paid off.
So if you were born in the Bronx today, this year, do you think you would stand any chance of...
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on in the Bronx anymore.
Ah.
Ever since they put in the Cross Bronx Expressway, the Bronx was divided into two pieces, things fell apart, in my opinion, but you don't want to hear about that.
I'm going to come to you, so tell me if you've got a question. Does anyone here have a question yet? Keep thinking about the questions that you have for our panelists. I have another one for them, which is, each of you have had a dazzlingly successful career in the thing that you're brilliant at. Is there a talent that you don't have that you wish you did have?
Me? Well,
sure.
Okay. Well, ladies first.
Well, I wish that I had studied music more deeply than I know anything of, and also theatre. I love theatre. And I would have loved to have had more experience with theatre.
And you,
I have a
Elliott?
very similar answer. I wish I knew music better, both for understanding and for performing, and not writing, but that's too hard. But but I did not get a good musical education, and most people do not. I was included in it. So I wish I had that more.
And Elliott, have you taken any inspiration in your work from fields outside of mathematics and physics? Has music or literature or real-world problems ever been the spark that has taken your work forward in any way?
Well, truthfully, no. I've never had this, and I don't know how it would work, but no. It would be nice, but
and what about science, maths, physics in your work?
Well, I think as an artist, artists are very interested in other disciplines, and I've seen other artists work with ideas from physics and so on. But my own interest has taken me to, political thought and philosophy. I remember the first lecture I attended when I was a student in Paris was that of Noam Chomsky, and I was totally blown away by that kind of humanistic thinking. And ever since then, it's been largely people in political and thought and philosophy that have interested me. And I feel as an artist, that's a range that needs to be also honed in while at the art school, etc. It's just too subject-oriented, and it should have a wider humanistic base.
And a day in the life of the artist, I mean, one imagines that Elliott goes off to his office and works well into the night.
I can do the same thing at home.
Or at home, indeed.
And I do it.
Right. And how long is your work day, Elliott?
Oh, it depends. There are days when zero happens, and then there are days when it just keeps going the whole until I go to bed. So
I think that's consoling for the rest of us, And Nalini, we imagine artists work when they're inspired, but do you actually have a structured?
Yes, I do. There is inspiration only comes through work. I made myself a little schedule that I would do what musicians do, and in India you have a system of working in music called riyaz. And it's through the riyaz, which is constantly practicing the notes, that you come to something new. And I said to myself that every day I have to make 8 drawings, no matter how good or bad, didn't matter. But your thoughts had to be on paper. And from that came other ideas. So I still try to follow that. I did it all through my time as a student and later on as well. But it gives you a little rhythm in your life, and it's helped a lot to go back to those drawings and find a thought that you hadn't worked on, and maybe now you have other ideas about it, and you could, hone into them.
Brilliant. Your questions? Yes. Do introduce yourself.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Chris Stone. I'm a professor of practice at the School of Government. I'm just curious for both of you about the source, if it's true, of your confidence that we as a species are going to get through this current moment. Nalini, you've written about the balance between technology and humanity and the hope that we get the balance right. And I'm curious if you think we're going to, and what makes you think that balance is going to be right for us. And Elliott, the same in sense, whether humanity can cope with the exponential growth of itself and its needs and its consumption in this world of very limited resources, and can we get through where all the models tell us the limits are approaching of our ability to survive as a species on the planet?
So there's an easy one. Will we get through? Nalini.
Unfortunately, this light is right into my eyes. I think that I have hope. And I think it's the spiritual in the human being that can really give us that hope. And that spiritual part of the human exists. So this is what I believe. And I think that things are, when have we not said it's hopeless? there's been decades and decades when people have said, it's hopeless, how are we going to go on? It's going to end. But still we do go on. So, and of course there's science that has helped us.
So Elliott, will we get through? Are you with Nalini on this?
I guess the answer is yes. Somehow nobody really can plan the trajectory, but I think we'll get through. We're very clever.
Yeah.
And
have there been other moments in your life when the world has said, we might not get through?
well, World War II.
Right.
Oh yes, I remember this quite well, and it looked very bad. And so Vietnam got through, being bombed to pieces, but it's flourishing now.
Yeah.
So it's, the human body, the mind is such a wonderful object, a machine that somehow sneaks its way out of any problem, and we don't know how or why, but it does it. And I think we'll get out of the whatever we see as problems now. We'll find a solution. It may not be completely pleasant, but we'll get through. You didn't ask if we're going to have this kind of standard of living. If you ask me that, I don't know if we will get very far with this kind of standard of living, but we'll get through with some standard.
There we are, an optimism from both our laureates. Next question.
Qualified optimism.
Qualified optimism. Do we have another question? Yes.
Tony Hope, a retired psychiatrist and medical ethicist. My question's for Nalini Malani. You implied, I think, that if women were in positions of power, they would make a better job of things.
No, I didn't say that.
Right?
Because we've seen women in power and they haven't really, behaved in a feminist manner. We know this from leaders who have been women, and they haven't. I do believe one thing, and I think that's what's helped me a lot, that there are female and male regions of the mind that doesn't necessarily belong to a sex. There are a lot of men I know who are feminist, more feminist than women are, than some women have been. So that really is what I believe, seriously, because that really, the idea of femininity and masculinity are abstract ideas, and you need a balance of the two in every person, and that helps the psyche, I think.
Okay.
Check.
Good. You've negated my question by denying my initial presumption, so thank you.
Well, become a feminist and a great world leader, I think, is her answer to you. Other questions? What else do we have? Good.
Good evening, everyone, and big congratulations to all of the laureates. My name is Mark Boris Andrijanic. I'm a very proud former student of the Blavatnik School. And it's often said that politics is just too important to be left to politicians. And we've had some good experience with scientists and artists in politics. Think of Benjamin Franklin or Angela Merkel, on the other hand, being scientists, or Václav Havel, leading the glorious revolution in Czech Republic as an artist. So do we need more artists and scientists in public service, and how can we make this happen?
A great question. Elliott, why don't you start this time?
Well, I'm not qualified really to talk about artists because I'm not an artist, but scientists, yes, we can always use more in public service. I think there's just too many problems that can be solved by scientific analysis, and they may not be beautiful problems, but they have to be solved. And so I'm very optimistic in that direction. You can talk about the artists.
What would it take, was Mark's other question, what would it take to lure some of your great scientific colleagues into government, into public service?
There are already a lot, and they do a pretty good job, at least in the United States and UK, and the rest of Europe and Japan. So well, we could always use more, of course. These are scientific problems that have to be faced. What's important is choosing. There will always be several voices from the scientific community, and what's tricky is which voice to listen to. And that problem has not always been solved successfully, but I think we're learning, and I'm optimistic.
So when you're listening to scientists, what's your rule of thumb about whether they're worth listening to or not? How do you decide which ones to listen to?
I ask their colleagues who know what. That's what I do. I have to ask somebody who knows what they're talking about just to get started.
Right.
And then make my own judgment. But I need an introduction.
Right. And the question you ask their colleagues is? What question do you ask their colleagues about them before you decide whether to listen?
It's always variable. Tell me what is motivating this person who's talking. What is his political affiliation, if it's about government and public policy? And tell me something about his past performance as a colleague, so that I can translate that into a judgment. So, but I don't always get the chance to do that, unfortunately. I wish I had more chances, but
thank you.
It's very difficult.
Nalini, do we need more artists in government?
I think there should be a consortium of people, experts in the field, scientists as well as artists, and artists from different disciplines, who should be, people. The government should be consulting people like that, to decide things that are meant to be, to further progress in a society. The thing is that science has given us the possibility, even the cell phone, to be able to talk across the world anytime. And each of us have our own mobiles. But are we really talking to each other? We're not really doing that. And I think that some of the things that have been given to us through science and technology are such that could make a much better place on this earth, and we're not using it to the optimum. We're using these gadgets, in fact, for making enemies and things like that. I think that that's where a consortium of humanists from all disciplines should be sitting with government, deciding policies. The problem is that politicians come from everywhere. It's the only profession that doesn't need a degree. When you get your plumber into the house, you have to see, does he have a diploma? What does he have? An electrician. But a politician, you'll have Mr. Trump coming. What kind of person is he, And he's going to be, if he comes, then one of the biggest democracies of the world is going to be, he's going to be the head of that state. It's going to affect us all. So this is a problem. This is a hazard.
We're living in times when the scientific knowledge, the rational knowledge, is in many countries being trumped by the affective, the emotion, the call to people's emotion. Does art help us understand that? Does it help us understand how to communicate to the emotion of people rather than just their brain?
I think it does, but I also believe that when such an emotion does emerge amongst politicians, they're dangerous. That could cause a hegemony of some sort, as we have seen already with governments which are pro-religion. It becomes problematic. I think that's where scientists and artists can really help.
Thank you. Next question. Do we have another question from the audience? Here, just down here.
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations to the recipients. I'm Gargi. I'm a student of a School of Government, and I'm also a civil servant from India. My question is directed to Elliott. I just wanted to know, as a man of science, you have been playing with experiments every other day. and experiments are full of failures many times. How do you handle the failures in your everyday life? And also, what kind of philosophy that you draw out, or a kind of message that you would like to share with us as a message for life, as a philosophy of life that you draw as a man of science? Thank you.
I'm not sure what the question is, but I'll try to answer it anyway.
Improv.
Huh? Improv. There were several threads there. Well, so one should think about science is worth studying because it teaches you how to ask accurate questions that are meaningful. It's not the only way. Mathematics does the same thing, but in a more limited area. So first of all, find out where the questioner or where the speaker is coming from, and what he's likely to, or she is likely to head for, direction to head in, and same kinds of questions that you ask when reading a scientific paper. Where is this thing going? And that's what I would look for.
Thank you. Did that answer, Gargi? Yeah?
I just wanted to clarify. I just want to say that as an experiment, as you play with experiments, you are encountering so many failures many times.
Yeah.
So how do you handle the failures? Because it is disappointing many times.
Yeah,
That's
so
a very good question.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Questions
You have
to
an
you.
opinion too, I'm sure, but okay. How do you handle failures? They come from time to time, and you go along some line of research. This happened many times, and then at the end, after some days, months, weeks, you find out that this was the wrong direction, and that's failure, so to speak. And you just have to learn how to overcome that. It happens from time to time, and fortunately not every day. And you have to live with it, that you may be heading in the wrong direction. I think maybe this is what sort of thing you have in mind. I'm not sure. And how do you deal with it? You just suck it up, as we say. You start all over again. And
In the earlier part of your career, did you ever nearly give up?
nearly give up? Yes. After I got my PhD, it was roughly speaking, it took 4 years before I really got anything going again. And many attempts and many failures, and things just didn't seem to be working in a positive direction. It took a while to accumulate enough problems to think about.
And what got you through?
And then I could think about which one I might try to solve, and then I started solving problems. So you have to accumulate a bunch of interesting questions and problems as you go along, and think about them subconsciously and consciously. And anyway, to make one problem I thought about for 34 years before I solved it. And so you have to live with that. When it happens, it's wonderful. And otherwise, it just goes on with nothing coming. You have to. It's a very up and down situation.
Does that resonate with you, Nalini?
Well, 34 years is a long time. But I must, there's a line from Samuel Beckett which helps me a lot. Fail, fail again, and fail some more, fail better. It's from Samuel Beckett. Really, I mean, failures come very often to me. I mean, you just tear up a sheet of paper and start afresh.
But where did the strength come from, Nalini, at the beginning of your career, before you became a celebrated artist?
Oh, I was never celebrated.
But it must have been hard. I mean, there must be periods of, it might not be failure, but of feeling misunderstood or undervalued or whatever. Like, what got you through that?
Well, you know, it wasn't easy to be a woman artist in India. There are very few outlets. But my desire was always to address a larger public. And the very fact that in India, people understood montage very well, film montage, because of television and Bollywood and so on. So my idea was always to work with a moving image, and that's what I started with. And then it was much later that I had the opportunity to show the work, but there were long periods where I just worked long, and I never showed the work, it was just there.
It's very powerful what you're each saying there. A very good government leader said a different but similar thing about government. She said, what people don't get is that good government, is like repainting your wooden window frames. In other words, all the work needs to go into the preparation. It's the 34 years of thinking through the problem, or the years and years of finding that voice and finding that place to show your art. She said it's in the sanding and the stripping back of the paint and preparing, and the longer you spend on the preparation, the better the effect of the paint. Whereas her comment was that most politicians today just want to come and slap some paint on an unprepared window frame. And I think there's something that our two laureates are telling us about the preparation for quality that takes a lot of failure. Thank you, Gargi, for the question. Another question from you. Yes.
Congratulations to both of you. It's a pleasure to have you here. I am Anandi Mani. I am one of the professors in the school. My question is to Elliott. You said that after your PhD, it took you about 4 years to get started, in terms of, and that you to accumulate a lot of questions. My question to you is, how do you judge what's an interesting question, and has your answer to that changed over time?
Yeah, after 4 years.
Changed?
What, sorry?
I said once, in the 4 years after you felt you had accumulated enough questions.
I learned how to cope with, deal with this ebb and flow of ideas.
Yeah.
And it's something you have to control. And it took me, other people are different, it took me 4 years to get it all straightened out. And knew how to generate problems and solve them. And, live with constant failure. Because most of the things you think about are wrong. It's only once in a while you pick up a jewel and it's worth writing a paper about. But
and so do you have a process for picking up questions?
No. It's haphazard. Other people are different. But as for me, it's haphazard.
Now, we're a teaching university that's about encouraging people to achieve to the best of their ability. So if we could close tonight with your advice to people in your field who are just beginning their careers, what's your advice to them which might help them truly excel?
Don't let your ego get the better of you.
That's very
I think that's very important.
Can you elaborate that? Has your ego ever gotten the better of you to
It's a
poor
failure.
effect?
That's really a failure then, if ever that has happened. But it hasn't, because I really haven't, I'm not saying that I'm perfect. There are times when people say, oh, what I saw of yours was really fantastic. For a moment you have this great joy. But I think that becomes a real problem if you get too complacent with whatever you've done. If you get too complacent and you begin to believe, and then you start to clone yourself, and that's terrible. For an artist, that's the end.
Well, I would say first there's persistence. You have to understand that 90% of the time what you're thinking is wrong. And it takes time. I mean, before you get the right answer. So persistence, and second, think about something you would like to achieve, some kind of problem you would ultimately like to solve, and keep it in the front of your mind, but relax. You're going to fail most of the time. And it's like climbing a mountain or something. But finally, if you're lucky and you've done your homework, then you will eventually solve it. But that's a difficult learning process because most people, I think, give up too early. There are people I've known who have lots of talent, but they get discouraged. But be persistent. Hang on.
I'd like to come back to what was said about Dr. Yana, who we remember here this evening. The other word used to describe him was joyful. And you could see in the photos of him at his microscope with his colleagues the joy that he took from his work, from his collaborations, from the young people, from winning the prize. Does your work still bring you joy, or does it bring you joy? Yes?
I couldn't live without drawing. It's for me oxygen.
Yes, is the short answer. But there are these key moments when you've been thinking about something for a long time or even not thinking about it, but there's this moment in a specific day and a specific time when you solve the problem that you've been thinking about subconsciously. And this is a time of great joy. There's a famous mathematician who was thinking about a problem for a long time and eventually solved it, but he solved it at a moment that he put his foot on the ladder going into a streetcar. Adamar was his name. And he's a famous story. He writes in his autobiography. He was getting nowhere. And then he put his foot on the streetcar to get in. And he suddenly saw it. And so these moments are very rare. But that's the moment you live for. And, you just have to be patient.
Thank you. What a wonderful note in this university to end on, the joy of that moment. Not every moment of every day of every academic is full of such joy as our laureates have reminded us, but it's worth it for those moments of joy. Will you join me in thanking, in both congratulating and thanking our laureates here this evening? And now we will go through into the atrium where Dr. Pollard from the Ashmolean is going to give us, introduce the Ashmolean to us over some drinks. And then we will have the delight of seeing a very precious collection of kimonos which were designed by a former Kyoto Prize Laureate before going in to dinner. So thank you all for joining us for this part of the event, and I look forward to the next, which will be just next door to this room. Thank you all.
Thank you.